I would like to speak with you just for a few moments about the history of funeral service in the Fourth Ward community, or Freedman's Town community. We had several very highly successful black businesses that came out of the community already. But one of the most prosperous and productive funeral homes is going to be the Frierson and Sons funeral home. That's Frierson. I've kind of been researching them for quite a while and found out that they were very profitable. And that funeral home was almost 100 years old at the time of their closing. Located at 201 West Dallas in 1923, a very historical firm. And from my research, Frierson and Sons was very reputable and prestigious. What we're gonna see here is an ad at the bottom of the city directory from 1912. It appears that this funeral home was managed by Mr. Marion J. Frierson. It's kind of amazing that there's not many records, seeing that they were in business for almost 100 years. This is the census report from 1910, almost the turn of the 19th century. Here we have an ad or a list of advertisers from Jackson Funeral Home, 1913 and 1917. Jackson Funeral Home was considered upper class and a powerhouse of a funeral home located at 806 West Dallas Avenue. Jackson was located in the heart of the business district of the Fourth Ward, or Freedman's Town community. They were the go-to funeral home for first-class service during those times. And they were highly, highly successful and well known in the area. Jackson closed down not many years ago. They would have been, I believe, the oldest black funeral home in Houston. What's interesting about Jackson is that it was just something about that beautiful facility that was on West Dallas with those beautiful columns and that big, beautiful white building. Unfortunately, that building was simply demolished, and they ended up building another building in the Third Ward area on Wheeler and one on South Acres. The building on South Acres never fared too well, but the Jackson name remained a legacy of a name for many years. There was also a split in funeral homes back in those days, just like we have today. There was a Daniels and Phillips funeral home located at 1010 San Felipe, which is the same as West Dallas in the Fourth Ward area. Apparently, Mr. Cleve Daniels, who worked for Jackson, and a Mr. Fred Phillips, who worked for the historical I.S. Lewis Funeral Home, combined and opened up Daniels and Phillips. I did a completely different video dedicated solely to Mr. I.S. Lewis. Cleve Daniel is very historical. My dad did have a funeral home in the Fourth Ward area, and he said that Mr. Cleve Daniel was one of his biggest competitors at the time. He said that try as he may, that the public would continue to call Mr. Cleve Daniel over and over and over for service. Sadly, Mr. Cleve Daniel passed away some years later, and I don't believe he had any family left to carry on the funeral business. Okay, so now we run into a scandal in funeral service in Fourth Ward. My dad's dad, my grandfather, Milton Pruitt, opened up a funeral home with a gentleman called Mr. H.L. Bradford. That funeral home was located in the 1300 block, 1303 Andrews. It was reported that Mr. Pruitt and Mr. Bradford had a disagreement, and somehow the funeral home was cut in half with a logging saw. I don't know how true this is, but this has been reported to me by countless and countless of people. What I do find interesting is that Mr. Pruitt ended up with a funeral home located at 1303 Andrews, and Mr. Bradford ended up with his funeral home located at 1303 and a half Andrews, which basically puts these two buildings right next to each other. So I'm not sure about the fact that this building was cut in half. I did grow up in the Fourth Ward area, and there was a very small alley between those two buildings that you could put your hand through, and I could never understand why that alley was there. I kind of feel like there's some truth to this community myth. I just don't know. But I do know that Mr. Pruitt and Mr. Bradford had two funeral homes located exactly right next to each other. Mr. Bradford eventually closed down, and Mr. Pruitt moved across the street to 1219 Andrews. So as you can see, we've had several funeral homes that were successful that started out in the Fourth Ward community, in the Freedman's town community. I always like to remember our long lost and forgotten funeral directors who serviced their communities and their areas. The funeral industry is a 24-hour commitment to service to the people. And Frierson and Sons was 100 years old. Jackson Funeral Home was 100 years old. Cleve Daniels had many, many years. My family, the Pruitt family of funeral directors, we basically started in the Fourth Ward community. And we had a great impact on the community. And I just want to take this time to remember their dedication to service. Peace and blessings.